A drunk biker mocks Keanu Reeves' wife, expecting a brutal fight, but Keanu's calm response shocks everyone. Instead of throwing a punch, he reveals who she really is and calls the man out with quiet strength and dignity. Within seconds, the biker is disarmed, ashamed, and walks away a completely changed man. Some days, life feels like a quiet movie running in the background, until one sentence explodes like a grenade. For Keanu and his wife, that sentence came from a drunken biker in a dusty bar on the side of an endless highway. The day had started almost painfully perfect. The sky above the California desert was a clean, burning blue, and the wind was warm against their faces as Keanu's black motorcycle cut through the empty road. His wife, Maya, leaned into his back, her arms wrapped around his chest, her chin resting on his shoulder. He could feel her laughter more than hear it when she shouted over the engine. "You know you drive slower than the characters you play, right?" He smiled under his helmet. Out here, he didn't need to be a movie star, a meme, or anyone's idol. Out here, he was just a man on a bike with the woman he loved more than anything on the planet. They had taken this ride because Keanu needed it. The weeks on set had been long, full of fake punches, choreographed gunshots, and cameras that never stopped watching. The irony wasn't lost on him. Millions of people knew him as the ultimate action hero, the man who could kill with a pencil and walk through hell without blinking. But inside, he was tired of violence, even pretend violence. He wanted quiet, real quiet, the kind you feel in your bones when the world disappears behind you in the rearview mirror. Maya understood that without him ever having to say it. That was one of the 1,000 reasons he'd fallen in love with her. They spotted the bar just after noon, a low building hunched against the heat, neon beer signs buzzing faintly in the windows. A row of chrome motorcycles lined the front like a steel fence. Maya thumped his shoulder twice, their signal for "I'm hungry now, not later." He laughed and pulled in. As they took off their helmets, the smell of grilled onions and gasoline drifted through the air, mixed with the faint sharpness of spilled beer. It wasn't fancy, but it was real, and right now, real was exactly what he wanted. Inside, the light dimmed to a smoky amber. A jukebox in the corner played an old rock song that sounded like it had been stuck on repeat for 20 years. A group of bikers occupied the far side of the bar, leather vests patched with skulls and flames, voices loud, laughter louder. The bartender looked up, did a double take at Keanu, then quickly pretended he hadn't. Keanu appreciated that. He and Maya slid into a booth by the window, facing each other. She pushed her sunglasses up into her hair and gave him that look, the one that said, "You're finally relaxing. I like this version of you." "Burger?" she asked. "Two," he said. "You'll steal half of mine anyway." She grinned, busted, and reached across the table to intertwine her fingers with his. For a few minutes, it was just them. The scrape of plates behind the counter, the clink of glasses, the low hum of conversation. Keanu traced small circles on the back of her hand, studying the lines of her face, still amazed that after everything he'd lost in his life, he'd been given this ordinary, breathtaking moment. That was when the energy in the room shifted. It was small at first, just a change in the air. The biker's laughter cracked a little sharper. A chair scraped against the floor with more force than necessary. One of the men, broad-chested with a black bandana tied around his head, glanced over at their booth and did a double take. His eyes narrowed, then flicked to Maya, lingering too long. Keanu felt it before he fully processed what was happening, a thread of tension pulling tight in his stomach. The bandana guy nudged his friend and jerked his chin toward their table. There was a low murmur, then a burst of crude laughter. Keanu caught only fragments. "Hollywood pretty boy, rich, thinks he's tough," he'd heard worse. He'd also learned long ago that reacting to every insult was a good way to go crazy, so he did what he always did. he focused on Maya, on the way she smiled at the waitress when their drinks arrived, on the way sunlight caught the small silver ring on her finger, the one he'd given her on a quiet night with no cameras, no red carpet, no one watching but the stars. But ignorance has a limit, and one of the bikers was already crossing it. Bandana guy, his patch said raise, stood up with a heavy exhale, his chair scraping backwards. The entire table went quieter by half a beat. The jukebox crackled through the end of one song and rolled into another. Rays took a long drink from his beer bottle, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and started toward them with the drunken confidence of someone who'd never really been stopped. Maya felt Keanu's fingers tense around hers. "Ignore it," she whispered. "We're just here to eat and leave." "I know," he replied softly, his voice steady but his jaw tight. He wasn't scared, not of this man, not of any man, but he was afraid of something else. The part of himself that had been trained for years to react fast, hit hard, take control. The part that movie sets kept feeding. The part he tried so carefully to keep locked away in the real world. Ray stopped at the edge of their table, the smell of stale beer and sweat pouring off him. He leaned one hand on the booth, his knuckles inches from Maya's shoulder. "Well, well," he drawled, his words slurring just enough to be dangerous. "If it is Mr. Movie Star himself." The bar had gone almost silent. A few phones were already out, screens held low but angled toward them. Keanu could feel eyes on his back, feel the weight of expectations from people who thought they knew him because they'd watched him reload a gun on a 12-foot screen. He looked up slowly, met Ray's stare. "We're just having lunch, man," he said, calm, measured. "No trouble." Ray's gaze slid from Keanu to Maya, then back again, a smirk curling at the edge of his mouth. "No trouble," he repeated. "You're sitting here with that on your arm and you're talking about no trouble." Maya stiffened. Keanu saw the hurt flash across her eyes before she hid it behind a blank mask, the same mask he'd seen her use when tabloids printed lies about her, about them. He felt a cold anger stir in his chest, slow but powerful, like a storm building far out at sea. Rays leaned closer to Maya, invading her space. "Tell me, princess," he sneered loud enough for the room to hear. "You with him for the money, or do you just have a thing for old men pretending to be tough?" The air snapped. Maya's eyes widened, not from fear, but from the shock of being reduced to an object in one sentence. Keanu's hand slid off the table and curled into a fist against his thigh before he could stop it. The line had been crossed, not because of the insult to him. He'd survived criticism from directors and late-night hosts and millions of strangers, but because of what Rays had just poured all over the woman he loved. In that single second, the entire bar seemed to hold its breath. The bikers behind Rays shifted, some egging him on with quiet chuckles, some watching with a flicker of doubt. The bartender froze halfway through pouring a drink. Somewhere a phone started recording in earnest, the tiny red light blinking like a warning. Keanu looked up at Rays and something in his eyes changed. Gone was the easy, gentle warmth, replaced by a focus so sharp it made Rays' smirk falter for a heartbeat. Every stunt he'd learned, every fight scene he'd trained for, every instinct screaming to protect Maya rose to the surface at once, demanding to be unleashed. Maya squeezed his knee under the table, a silent plea not to lose himself. Her touch was light, but it felt like the only thing anchoring him to who he wanted to be. And then Keanu made his choice, the one that would change not just this moment, but the lives of everyone in that bar. He pushed back his chair and began to stand. Keanu rose from the booth, the old vinyl seat groaning as if it understood what was about to happen. The room seemed to shrink around him. He wasn't towering or threatening, just steady, like a pillar someone had finally decided to push. He stepped between Reyes and Maya, one hand gently brushing her shoulder to ease her back, never taking his eyes off the biker. "Sit down, man," Reyes said with a crooked grin, pretending he hadn't just crossed every line. "Wouldn't want you to mess up that pretty face. Studio might charge me for the damages." Keanu's voice stayed low, almost quiet enough that only the two of them could hear. "You're going to step back," he said, "and you're going to apologize to my wife." The word wife landed heavier than anything else he said. Maya felt it hit her chest. Even now, in the middle of a bar with danger humming in the air, there was a warmth in the way he claimed her. But she also saw the fight in his eyes, the one he never enjoyed but always seemed ready for if someone he loved was threatened. Reyes chuckled, that loose, mean laughter that belongs to people who have had too much to drink and too little kindness in their lives. "Oh, is that how it works in Hollywood?" he said louder, making sure everyone in the bar heard. "You buy the girl, you get to demand respect. Tell me, Maya, is it? How much does he pay you to hold onto his back on that fancy bike?" Maya's cheeks flushed, not from shame but from a sharp, clean anger. She opened her mouth to answer, but Keanu lifted his hand slightly, not to silence her, but to tell her, "I've got this." His heart was pounding hard enough that he could feel it in his throat, but his training wrapped around it like armor. All those years of timing stunts, of rehearsing blows that never quite landed, had taught him how to look calm even when fire was raging inside. "This isn't a movie set," Keanu said. "Nobody's paying you to act tough. You're disrespecting a woman who's done nothing to you. Walk away." The bar was so quiet now that the soft clink of ice in a glass sounded like a hammer on metal. Reyes' friends watched with a kind of hungry curiosity. They'd seen fights before, but this one was different. This guy in front of them was famous for violence, for choreographed destruction. Part of them wanted to see if any of it was real. Reyes' smile faded. For a moment, just a moment, something like shame flickered in his eyes, then hardened again. He took one step closer, so close that their jackets almost touched. "You really think the world works like your movies?" he muttered. "You say a wise line, bad guy walks away, credits roll. Out here, respect is taken, not asked for." Before Keanu could respond, Reyes' hand shot out and grabbed him by the collar of his leather jacket, bunching the material into a fistful. Maya gasped, halfway out of the booth, but Keanu raised one hand toward her without looking back, a silent plea. "Stay there, please." The bikers at the table shifted, half rising, but none of them moved to stop anything. A phone somewhere zoomed in. The bartender took one hesitant step forward, then stopped, weighing his job against his fear. "Come on, tough guy," Reyes hissed, his breath hot with alcohol. "Show us John Wick, hit me just once, make me famous." Every muscle in Keanu's body coiled like a spring. It would be so easy. Too easy. A twist of the wrist, a shift of the weight, a single precise movement, and he could have Reyes on the ground, gasping for air, humiliated in front of his friends. His instincts whispered instructions he didn't even have to think about. His stunt trainers' voices echoed in his memory: react faster, commit, follow through. But over that noise, another voice rose, the quiet one that had grown louder with age and heartbreak. The one that reminded him of funerals, of mistakes, of the way violence always left shadows, even when it was justified. "You don't want this," Keanu said softly. Reyes' fingers dug deeper into his collar. "Yeah," he snarled, "I think I do." His arm drew back, fist clenched, shoulder tightening with the promise of a heavy, mean punch aimed straight at Keanu's face. Time stretched thin, like plastic pulled to the edge of tearing. Everyone in the room leaned in, breath held, waiting for the explosion. And Keanu didn't raise his hands to block, didn't strike first. didn't move the way every movie had trained them to expect. Instead, he did something that made the entire bar gasp before the punch ever landed. Keanu stepped in, not away, closing the distance until Reyes' fist had nowhere clean to land. The punch connected awkwardly with his shoulder and collarbone instead of his jaw, a dull thud of flesh on leather. Pain shot through his upper arm, bright and immediate, but he absorbed it, feet planted, eyes never leaving Reyes' face. He didn't swing back. For a second, Reyes looked almost confused. Fights had a rhythm he understood: insult, threat, punch, retaliation, chaos. But when he hit Keanu, the man in front of him didn't follow the script. Keanu simply reached up, took hold of Reyes' wrist, not twisting, not yanking, just containing it, like someone stopping a friend from falling off a ledge. "You done?" Keanu asked quietly. Reyes tried to pull free, but Keanu's grip, though gentle, was unshakable. The biker's eyes flashed, not just with anger now, but something more raw. Being held without being hurt was somehow worse. It stripped away his excuse that this was just another bar fight, just another forgettable night. "You think you're better than me?" Reyes spat, his voice cracking around the words. "You think because people scream your name and buy tickets to watch you pretend to bleed, you get to talk down to me?" "This isn't about me," Keanu said, still calm, still steady. He could feel the room hanging on every word, but in his mind there was only this man in front of him, this moment. "You're not angry at a stranger in a bar. You're angry at something that came long before we walked in." Reyes' jaw flexed. Close up, Keanu could see details the audience couldn't. The way the man's eyes were rimmed red, not just from alcohol, but from nights of not sleeping. The faded tattoo on his neck that looked like dog tags and dates. The tiny tremor in his bottom lip every time someone mentioned money, respect, or power. "You don't know a damn thing about my life," Reyes snapped. "You're right," Keanu answered. "I don't. But I know what it looks like when someone hurts people just to make their own pain a little quieter." Maya stepped out from behind him then, ignoring his instinct to shield her. Her voice was soft but carried cleanly through the silence. "You think he doesn't understand pain?" she said, looking Reyes straight in the eyes. "You think grief skips famous people because they're on posters?" Keanu flinched inwardly. He almost wished she wouldn't bring his past into this. But he also knew this wasn't about protecting his image. It was about telling the truth. "He's buried people he loved," Maya continued, her words trembling not from fear of Reyes, but from the memories she was walking through to say them. "He's lost more than you know. And you know what he didn't do? He didn't walk into a bar and tear apart someone else's dignity just because the world tore his apart first." Reyes blinked once slowly, like her words had landed where punches never could. For a fleeting second, his arm went slack in Keanu's grip, the fight draining out of him. Behind him, one of the younger bikers shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Reyes," the kid murmured, "maybe just—" "Shut up, Tyler," Reyes snapped over his shoulder, anger flaring back in self-defense. Everyone nearby saw the flash of something old and frightened beneath it, like a child who'd learned that shouting was the only way to keep from shaking. Keanu loosened his hold, giving Reyes a choice. "You can walk away," he said. "Right now, you can sit back down and be the man your brothers here think you are." Reyes stared at him, chest heaving. His pride clawed at his insides. Walking away would feel like losing. But staying in front of the cameras, in front of this calm-eyed actor who refused to hit him back, was starting to feel like something worse. "You're not a hero," Reyes muttered, voice suddenly lower, more honest. "You're just a guy with luck. Guys like me, we don't get luck. We get bills and bad news and people looking at us like we're dirt." "Maybe," Keanu said. But tonight, right now, you get a choice. You can be the man who hit a woman with his words and picked a fight with someone who didn't want one, or you can be the man who realized that didn't feel as good as he thought it would. The words hung there heavy and real. Ray's throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. His free hand clenched and unclenched at his side. You could almost see the war inside him, pride versus regret, anger versus the tiny spark of decency he'd been burying for years. Then, breaking through the tension like a crack of light under a locked door, another voice slid into the moment. "Oh, Dad." It was small, female, and full of confusion. The entire bar turned at once. In the doorway stood a girl of maybe 15, skinny in an oversized hoodie, a medical bracelet still looped around her wrist. Her hair was pulled into a messy ponytail, and her eyes were too old for her age, eyes that had seen hospital ceilings and waiting rooms instead of school dances. Ray's went rigid. Keanu felt it instantly, every muscle in the man's body turning to stone under his hand. The biker's tough guy armor evaporated in an instant, replaced by something naked and terrified. The girl's gaze slid from her father, to Keanu's bruising shoulder, to Maya's strained face, to the silent, watching crowd. "Dad," she repeated, voice shaking now, barely above a whisper. "What are you doing?" The sound of that question cut deeper than any insult in the bar. Ray's hand dropped from Keanu's collar like it had been burned. Keanu let go of his wrist at the same moment, stepping back just enough to give the man space, but not so far that he couldn't move if things suddenly turned again. "Lily," Ray's choked out, his voice cracking around her name. "You're supposed to be at the clinic. Who brought you here?" "The nurse said you left," she answered, hugging one arm around herself. "Said you stormed out after the doctor talked to you. Tyler texted me where you were, I thought." She glanced at the bikes outside, at the jacket on his back. "I thought you just needed air. I didn't think you'd be." Her eyes flicked to Keanu again, a flicker of stunned recognition surfacing. "Oh my God, you're..." Keanu gave her a small, almost apologetic nod. "Yeah," he said softly, "but right now I'm just a guy who really wants your dad to listen to you." Lily's gaze hardened, the teenager inside her pushing through the patient, the daughter. "You promised you wouldn't do this anymore," she said to Ray's, each word hitting him like a separate blow. "You promised after last time, no more bars, no more fights. No more getting kicked out of places because you're angry at the whole world." A murmur rippled through the bikers. Some of them looked away, uncomfortable, suddenly seeing their leader not as the fearless man who led rides and broke rules, but as a father who'd just been called out by his own child. Ray's shoulders slumped a fraction. The bravado in his eyes wavered, replaced by raw exhaustion. "You don't get it," he muttered, not quite looking at her. They want more tests, more treatments. They want money I don't have, Lily. I'm doing everything I can." Lily took a small step into the bar, voice quiet but firm. "You're not doing everything," she said, "because hurting people is everything. That's just you giving up in a loud way." The sentence lingered between them, fragile but unstoppable. Keanu felt something twist inside his chest. Suddenly, the pieces snapped into place. The dog tag tattoo, the insomnia in Ray's eyes, the desperation in every word he'd thrown like a weapon. This wasn't just a drunk looking to pick a fight. This was a man whose life had been sliding downhill for so long that anger felt like the only place where he still had control. Maya stepped closer, her voice gentle now, stripped of the edge it had carried before. "What did the doctor say?" she asked Lily softly, as if they were already on the same side. Lily hesitated, glancing at her father. His face twisted with shame, his jaw locked so tight his lips barely moved. "Don't," he whispered. Not here. Dad, she said, and this time her eyes filled with tears she'd clearly been holding back all day. They said the last round didn't work. They want to try something new. It might help. But the insurance, she broke off, biting her lip, unable to finish. In other words, Reyes rasped, staring down at the floor, if I don't come up with a miracle, my little girl doesn't get the chance she deserves. He looked up at Keanu then, and for the first time there was no hatred in his gaze, only a hollow, defeated kind of envy. So yeah, maybe I got a little mad at the guy whose face is on billboards while I'm trying to count coins at the gas station. The confession drained the last of the fight out of the room. Even the jukebox seemed to lower its volume in respect. The men at Reyes' table shifted uncomfortably, some staring at the floor, others looking at Lily with something like guilt. Keanu swallowed, his own throat tight. He hadn't expected this. He'd expected fists, maybe a broken glass, maybe cops. He hadn't expected a girl with hospital bracelets and eyes full of too much truth. I'm sorry, he said quietly, and the words surprised even him. I'm sorry the world has been that unfair to you. Reyes' brows knitted. Don't, he snapped automatically. Don't pity me. It's not pity, Keanu replied. It's respect. You're still standing. A lot of people would have folded a long time ago. Maya touched his arm, feeling how tense he still was, how keyed up his body remained even as the emotional landscape shifted. She could also feel the other battle starting inside him, the one between his instinct to help and his fear of being seen as some kind of savior performing generosity for cameras. But this wasn't a movie. This was a man and his daughter and a bar full of people who had just been forced to watch what hopelessness really looked like. Lily twisted the bracelet on her wrist, looking at her father like she still believed there was a version of him that could be better. You always tell me to be strong, she said softly, to keep fighting, but you're the one who looks like he's given up. The sentence landed like a final verdict. Reyes' hand rose to his face, covering his mouth for a moment as his eyes glistened. No one in the bar dared to speak. Seeing a big man cry is like watching a pillar crack. Everyone knows something important is breaking, and they're almost afraid to breathe. Keanu stepped forward, choosing his words carefully. Look, he said, scanning Reyes' face, then Lily's, then the circle of bikers around them. I can't fix everything. I can't change what the doctor said. But I know this much. Hitting people who didn't hurt you won't make your daughter's chances better. It'll just make her watch you turn into someone she doesn't recognize. Reyes' mouth trembled. His voice, when it came, was barely audible. You don't get it. I've tried everything I know. I don't have options. Maybe you don't, Keanu said, but I do. The words surprised the room. The cameras that had been recording for drama now caught something quieter, more dangerous in its own way. A man with money, with influence, with the power to change one family's story, and the impossible weight of choosing what to do in front of a dozen witnesses. Maya's eyes met his. She knew that look. She'd seen it when he signed on to quiet, charitable projects without press releases, when he slipped extra checks to crew members who were struggling, when he bought motorcycles for stunt teams and refused to talk about it in interviews. There was never a question of if he would help, only how. Keanu turned back to Reyes, his voice steady now, decision made. You said guys like you don't get luck, he said. Maybe today that changes. Reyes frowned, confused. What are you talking about? Keanu took a slow breath, feeling the weight of every watching eye, knowing that whatever he did next would ripple far beyond this dusty bar. I have a bike company, he said. Custom builds. We do charity rides sometimes, raise money for things that matter. I'm due to organize another one. He glanced at Lily, then back at Reyes. How do you feel about riding for your daughter instead of your anger?" The room went still again, but it was a different kind of stillness now. Not fear, not the electric hush before a punch, but the stunned quiet that comes when someone opens a door nobody knew was there. Ray stared at him, struggling to process what he was hearing. His hands, once fists, hung limply at his sides. Behind him, Tyler's eyes widened, hope flickering to life. "You do that," Ray's managed. "For us, after what I just—" Keanu didn't let him finish. "I'm not saying yes," he said firmly. "Not yet. I'm saying maybe. I'm saying there's a path out of this version of you if you're willing to walk it." Lily's breath caught, a tiny, involuntary sound of hope that she tried to swallow back down. "And here's the thing," Keanu added, voice dropping lower, more serious. "If we do this, you don't get to be the guy who starts fights in bars anymore. You don't get to be the guy who spits on strangers because life spit on him first. You want help?" He nodded toward Maya, toward Lily, toward the whole bar. "Then you become the man your daughter is praying you still are." Ray's lips parted, but no words came out. His entire life, violence had been his loudest language. No one had ever asked him to speak in anything else. The weight of the offer, the condition, the possibility settled over him like a heavy coat he wasn't sure he deserved to wear. Slowly, his eyes filled completely, tears clinging to his lashes but refusing to fall. And as the room waited, bikers, bartender, strangers with phones trembling in their hands. The man who had come here looking for a fight stood between the life he knew and the one he could barely imagine, forced to choose in front of his daughter and a very unexpected witness. Which version of himself would walk out of that bar?